video is sponsored by Squarespace. I firmly believe that you've got to really use your camera equipment in order to get to know it. And back in June, I said this about the GM5.
I think it's my favourite tiny camera ever.
So I thought it was time to revisit the Lumix GM5 several months later and 999 photos later to see if I still think it's my favourite everyday carry of all time. And I also said this.
I genuinely want to panic buy another one.
And I did. I found this second copy, this bashed up beauty, for just under £400, so I did actually panic buy this camera twice. Where is my black copy? Well, I've taken that on a little journey, I've packed it up and I've sent it to a mystery guest. More on them later. Having examined / obsessed about everyday carry cameras for a while now, I think most of these cameras fall into two camps. We have small-ish, like the Lumix S9, for example. It's certainly smaller than a traditionally formed full-frame camera, but it's still a little bit chunky, especially depending on which lens you pair with it. And then we have the truly pocketable sized cameras, like the GM5. So with small-ish, we might put it on a shoulder strap, we might put it in a sling bag. It's still fine and easy enough to take out with you every single day, but it still has a little bit more of a barrier to entry versus something that I can literally put in my coat pocket when it starts raining. I own a fair few properly pocketable everyday carries. The GM5 with the right lens is definitely one of them. I have the LX, the Lumix LX compact camera. I have this other cute little compact camera that's very pocketable. There are a couple that are properly pocketable. I think in terms of spec, the GM5 is up there with some of the very best of them. And that's because when cameras are this small, of course we do have a few compromises that we have to endure. For example, you may not find a flippy screen on most of these. You may not find an EVF on most of these. And some of them are smaller because they are fixed lenses and you can't change the lenses. However, with the GM5, while there is no flippy screen, we do have an EVF, we do have some proper front and back dials, and of course you can change the lenses on it as well. So there are a lot fewer compromises in this very, very small category. Now, of course, there are shortcomings. Nothing is perfect in the camera realm. We're all on the hunt for the perfect camera. With the GM5, there are two things that I've found that I miss a little bit in my 999 photograph extravaganza. First of all is weather sealing. It is a little bit of a pain, particularly in England when it's raining quite a lot at the moment. You know, you have to put the camera away sometimes as soon as things get interesting and the floors get wet and you get some nice reflections. Weather sealing would be great. And also I have missed some in-camera stabilization as well. However, I have to say, the Fujifilm X100 is a lot bigger, and that doesn't have in-body stabilization or weather sealing either, so I think it's sort of to be expected for a lot of everyday carry cameras. And despite there being no stabilization, and despite that I'm shooting on primes most of the time, so they're not stabilized either, I have managed to get a couple of handheld long exposures that I'm quite happy with. You just have to play around with the shutter speed and find that sweet spot that what works, and obviously have a very steady hand. So it's not the end of the world, because that's what I want in-body stabilization for most of the time, to do some like sort of 1 second handheld exposures. You ain't getting a second out of this, but you can get a little bit of motion blur depending on your subject. So here are some of my favourite images from the last few months and from my 999 photo project. I got the idea from tech reviewer Becca. She does this with smartphones quite regularly, and I thought, what a brilliant idea, what a brilliant project to take on, because when you have to shoot basically 1,000 photos with a camera, you gotta be a bit less picky. I'm guilty of this a lot, where it's like, if I'm staying local and I'm going out with friends, I sometimes think, well, you know, I'm not in the Grand Canyon or anything, I don't really need to take a camera with me, but the joy of an everyday camera is that it will fit into your life in those more mundane moments as well as the big moments. So with this project, it was basically stuck to me. Stuck it in my bag, stuck it on my shoulder, whatever. I got to document more fun, informal parts of my life. And it sort of takes the pressure off. I think, you know, if you go out with this pressure upon yourself to think, this photo walk, I'm getting 3 shots that I absolutely love. That's really hard because so much of these things are out of our control. Whereas if you go out and think, I'm going to shoot 50 photographs today, and I acknowledge that 40 of them may be bad, It doesn't matter. It gets you out experimenting in ways that you normally wouldn't. So if you find yourself, maybe you've bought a new camera, or maybe you've just not been out with your camera for a little while, we all go through phases, why not set yourself a 999 photo challenge and just take the pressure off? Just go out and have fun, and if you capture something worth keeping, you do. If not, you don't, and it doesn't matter. We're shooting digital, it doesn't cost us anything except our time. And I think there's always something to learn regardless. So in the past few months, I've had the big days with the GM5. I've done some hiking around the Faroe Islands, for example, or I found myself at the top of the Shard in London with a very unfortunate 15mm lens. It wasn't much good for anything. But it caused me to look for different compositions. Maybe I couldn't get the view very well with the 15mm focal length, but I could get interesting photos of people around and sort of use people inside the Shard as my composition rather than the traditional view. Still wish I had a longer lens, but you know, you gotta make do with what you've got on you. But also, I took this picture when I had a pub lunch and I had a barbecue at a friend's house, and sometimes it's just nice, even if nobody else sees the images except you, it's nice to document your life and look back on. And one other aspect of this 999 photo challenge is I've stuck the SD card in June and I've not taken it out until a couple of days ago to edit the photos for this video. So I've used it sort of like I've had a roll of film developed. I've not really looked back, I've not double checked anything, I've not edited as I go. And looking back over the past few months in sort of a big span of images on this camera has been really fun. It's sort of like a little time capsule of the last few months of summer. It's been great. Here is one thing that I found that was missing on the GM5. Well, not missing, but interchanged. Let me explain. Because I was taking more informal photos with this camera for the last few months, I took out the GM1 for another video, and that has an on-camera flash, whereas the GM5 doesn't. It has a fully functioning hot shoe. Pros and cons to both. I think normally, because I value having a hot shoe for more proper photographs, shall we say, I think the GM5 ticks the boxes for me, but for this more informal project, I actually really missed having the flash. I think there's some sort of charm to having this on-camera flash. It's sort of like a very throwbacky look. Maybe not, you know, they're not going to end up in a gallery one day, but it's really nice to document an evening with the flash. Unfortunately, I did get a very banged up version of the red one. And I don't mind, it still works, it's fine. I'm not one to be too fussed about cosmetic damage. And my black version that I bought in Tokyo is pristine. Absolutely pristine. You wouldn't look at that and think, this is a 10-year-old camera. You would look at it and go, this came out of the factory yesterday. The red one, it came out of the bin yesterday. The hot shoe cover is actually properly just wedged in. So in the red one, I get neither the flash nor the hot shoe. So yeah, I've always been quite agnostic about onboard flash, but I think sometimes for an everyday carry, it can be quite nice to have. So, my mystery guest. You may have guessed this already, as I had a little cameo on his channel recently. This is Tom Colton, and he is a wonderful YouTuber. If you don't follow him already, definitely do so. He loves a tiny camera, and he has the most filthy sense of humour ever. It's great. So I packaged my black camera and sent it over to him. So let's see what Tom thinks.
So, Emily has kindly shipped me one of her beloved GM5s all the way from the UK to me here in Canada. Why would she do that? Well, partly because all of the more competent YouTubers she actually wanted to appear on this channel were way too busy, so now she's stuck with me. But also because I already own this, the GM1, and it's been my go-to pocket-sized travel camera for almost a year now, and I genuinely love this thing, particularly when it's paired with this 20mm f1.7. So, despite me pretending to take this out of the box for the first time just a minute ago, in true YouTuber fashion, that was all bollocks, because I've actually been shooting with this thing for the past week, and I've got to say that I do really like it, albeit for one fairly significant detail which I'll get onto in just a minute. But anyway, the three things that I really do appreciate with this design: firstly, that it has a proper command dial on the back here. On the GM1 you only get one of these flimsy D-pad type designs, which, let's be honest, nobody actually enjoys. We all just kind of tolerate it for the most part. Bit like my YouTube channel now I think about it. Second thing, pop-up flash on the GM1, gone. Instead, we have a much more versatile hot shoe port, which, as somebody who never uses pop-up flash, Given the option, I would much rather have a hot shoe port for attaching accessories. Finally, and this is obviously the big one, the EVF. Now, I will be totally honest and say that I do tend to prefer using the rear screen on the back here for composing shots, as I am getting a bit old now, and using an EVF for long periods of time does tend to give me eye strain. I know, it's a hard life. But when shooting on bright sunny days, having this EVF totally came in clutch, even if the display is so miniature. So that's the good stuff, but what's the downside that I mentioned? Well, it's the price. You see, you can currently buy a GM1 on eBay for between £300 to £500 or $400 to $600, depending of course on the colour, what it comes included with, the condition, blah blah blah. And whilst I think personally that is still very expensive, I was shocked to find that the GM5 sells for between £500 to £800 or $750 to $1,000, and in some cases even more than that, which I'm going to be honest made me do a little vom in my mouth. So, is this GM5 worth paying around double your money? I guess the answer will entirely depend on how much you value having an EVF, hot shoe port, and arguably better handling with proper dials and stuff. For me personally, although this GM5 is clearly the better designed camera of the two, I am just way too tight to be paying that kind of money for one. So unless the prices drop anytime soon, I think I'm going to stick around with my GM1 for the time being.
So let this 999 photo challenge be a reminder to you to get out and shoot with whatever camera you have. If it's new to you, then it's a great opportunity to get to grips with it and get that muscle memory in place. And if you haven't been inspired for a while, maybe it's a great opportunity to sort of get the cobwebs off and get out there shooting again. And I hereby give you permission to take well thought out photos, not thought out photos, really cool photos that you're quite proud of, and very truly silly photos. Just go and pew 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 and enjoy yourself. Let me just quickly talk about the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is where I host my website, aka the other love of my life aside from this YouTube channel. And if you are looking to create a website, you cannot find an easier platform to do so than Squarespace. I have no blooming idea about code or design or anything, and I've managed to get a pretty nice website, if I do say so myself. And the best thing about Squarespace for me is it started off many moons ago as just a basic blog, and it's grown with me over time, where I've started my mailing list, I've started to sell digital products, I've started to sell workshops. You can add in all these features as you grow. So if you have a project that needs a website, perhaps you want to share some photography portfolio with the world or create a blog, whatever it is, definitely give Squarespace a go. And if you use my handy dandy URL, you'll get money off your first purchase as well. If the GM5 is a little bit too rare or too rich for your blood, because it is quite a premium tiny camera, check out this video next where I compare it to all the other more affordable and readily available tiny cameras in the Lumix lineup.